Thank you. So the screen is around, yes. Okay, got it. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm a chief in a section that's called the Longitudinal Data on Immigration and Veterans. So I work with a center called Diversity and Social Cultural Statistics. I'm in Ottawa. In the office with electricity. You should see my presentation from now on. Today, I don't know where is the screen. My mouse is going to the other screen. Sorry, I'll find a way. Give me a second. No, I have a mouse problem. I don't think I need a mouse. I need a keyboard. Yes, okay, it's working. Today, very interesting topic. I wanted to get a little start and talking about how Statistics Canada introduced important information on immigration in general, but also give you a little idea of what is the angle. We've been doing a lot. So we do all the information on the latest outcome of Canadians and immigrants. That's kind of the obvious. This year, we've done the Census 2021 release. So lots of information on immigration over there. We do longitudinal data, obviously, and as well as labor force information. And all of this is providing the current portrait of immigrants. And a lot of those portraits we give are on economic outcomes. So here on the screen, I've just copied something that was shared in other presentation about the big takeaways we've published these days. So COVID pandemic, what's happening with immigration flows, how immigration is essential to address unmet demands on low skill and high skill in many factors. We also have research that did discuss about how in the long-term immigration flows will solve a couple, not all, of issues with the aging population and the labor market. There are a lot of research that talks about labor market outcomes. The data source I'm responsible for talks about that. The recent immigrants improved their substantially their economic outcomes lately. Temporary foreign workers, students are coming more and more frequently in the country. They are an important element for labor supply. That's what measured that. And while all of the integration of our immigrants back in the country is improving, we still see lots of questions with regard to credential recognition. Are they recognized for their study? So I wanted to give you a quick portrait of what we write most often. Here, economic outcomes is what I see most often. But then I want to put into your mind the fact that we don't write that much on the pathway to settlement. Okay, what I'm presenting here is a little bit of that. So today I'm presenting a project that was sponsored by the Ontario Refugee Resettlement Secretariat. I think he has changed the name. The objective, the origin of this project that was about 5 years ago was to encompass economic outcomes again. But when they contacted us, they wanted to get information on health and education for Ontario refugees. And at the time, we were talking about Syrian refugees, okay? Wanted to track what was happening in a wider and more component for them. Then we developed a longitudinal immigration statistical environment. I might use the term LISE more freely during the presentation. We did it for not only Ontario refugees, but it's for all immigrants and Canadians actually, to which we connect to two administrative data bank to multiple subject matter. Okay, the two admin data bank are the longitudinal immigration database and the longitudinal administrative data bank. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit of those. And I'll also explain the administrative data we've attached to health and education. It's 5 data sources over there. and we also did put the census into it. Okay, so we're talking here about not sample surveys, we're talking about full administrative databases. I was talking to you about the first objective was for Syrian refugees. The objective was to get a full population so you can drill down precisely on your need by province, by subgroup, etc. And that was a key element here, but that's not an easy element. I'll make a little review on how we do that quickly. So we have keys between data sources that are internal to Statistics Canada. We attach them, we go through a process called the social, in the team it's called the social data linkage environment. This process is highly secure linkage environment. We link those data sources, this population for social analysis. And the keys are cleaned up, so it's a pretty heavy process, but everything is cleaned up and managed. There are duplicates that arrive, there are decisions that have to be taken, but all of this is part of the social SDLE or social data linkage environment. It brings, so the LISE has complex elements. So what I'm going to present is not always easy. We'll go through some of those limits. What's happening here is we have connected longitudinal data sets together. Okay, so there's going to be some kind of consistency challenges, like how you're going to present your output is a challenge. Because we can't connect everything to everything in one spot, we are dealing with pairwise linkages. So you can only retrieve information from 2 sources at the time. You cannot build fully your health and education and 3 data sources for this, because the accuracy could be a challenge here, and we need to respect the privacy. It's an important thing that we try to maintain. What we are offering right now is not exactly a new data source. I'll explain a little bit what it is, but these are files with keys that allows you to connect other files with keys, have beautiful image with colors after. You'll understand a little bit why it is. You get access to the data sources you requested. So although we have about 6 data sources connected to, you can only access to what your research is requesting. So we'll evaluate your research need to get this access. But let's talk about the core information. So 2 core database, that's where you're going to pull out your main population. One is the longitudinal immigration database. I'm going to call it IMDB. The IMDB, again, I've said it, it's a full population, so it's an administrative data files. It's coming from IRCC, so Immigration and Refugee Citizen Canada, Citizenship Canada. It has permanent and non-permanent residents. I will go through some of the details, and it attach this to CRA information. How far we go? For the attachment in the LISE, it goes up to immigrants since 1980. Now the IMDB goes beyond that, and it's available in microdata beyond that, but we don't have much more. The other thing is we connect that to CRA, so we connect that to T1FF a little bit more. I'll explain more. Since 1982, so it leaves you the options to look into longitudinal track longitudinally the information. The other data source it is not from my team, but it's a collaboration with another team. It's called the LAD, so the Longitudinal Administrative Data Bank. Sorry. It is a 20% sample of all the SIN numbers in Canada. So every time we submit new SINs, for example, it's going to pull 20% new additional SINs. Connects to the T1FF. T1FF, same as the IMDB, is pretty much those 2 T1FF or tax T1 family file are a very wealthy source of tax information. It connects to this up to starting, sorry, to 1982. And I'll give you a little bit more example now with a little bit more the picture no more wording so far. Okay, so I tried to give you an overview of the LISE with this set of boxes. On the left, you're going to have the two core information, IMDB and the lab. On the right, you have health data. So we link to 3 data sources. One is Ontario Mental Health, National Ambulatory Care, Discharge Abstract Database. Okay, so cover all your full information of health you can have from Statistics Canada. Those data sources, I think they were already in the RDC, but we're talking about linkage here. Education registers the registered apprenticeship information, RAISE, and post-secondary information system. Okay. So on top of those 2 elements of research, health and education, we're connecting to the census 2016, where all the keys were prepared over there. The census obviously is going to give you a very large social information for analysis as well. I'll explain a little bit more in details, starting with the IMDB, and I'll kind of discuss of challenge when I present you a little bit the data source. Okay, so this is in a fair detail, nice picture. The coverage of the IMDB. So the IMDB again is coming from a project that we have with IRCC. This is on the left, the blue part. This is the information we receive from them. On the right, the green part is the information received from CRA. We touch base on permanent residents since 1952. We have 2 sets of permanent residents. We have the 1980 as well, up to, I think the last one is 2021. We have temporary resident, also at StatCan we call it non-permanent residents. So we're talking about students, people that comes on temporary foreign worker permits, a refugee claim. We have a citizenship data. And it's only starts in 2004, but we know when they get their citizenship. And settlement services, so immigrants are allowed to, when they stay in their permanent residency, they're allowed to get courses, and that tells us how what type of training they can get for their settlement. Okay, so already what you're seeing here is a bunch of time indicators or time flags. That is difficult. Our data allow you to make research on students that move to a permanent residency status, that moves to a citizen. Okay, you could have gone into settlement services, so it's kind of complex. And because it was not complex enough, we attached all the tax information for you to make research on the trends that's happening. So that's what you have here. As an example, the T1FF is one of the sources we use. T1FF is very large. It's the same as the lab, as I just mentioned earlier. It has about 500 variables. In it, you have variables at the individual level, at the family level. You're going to have everything that you have under your T1 that you are actually finding these days. Okay. If you did not file a T1, and we know for a certain population of immigration, we would have a lower count of T1. We have the information of the T4, so all the information from your pay stub. Okay, so it's pretty limited, but it still gets some really relevant information. Again, with the support of IRCC in the last years, we've developed special projects. Such as the children file. So we take immigrants that arrive as children, we link them to their parents, and we follow them over time to see what's happening. Okay. So this is a really rich information. Lots of research is done using the IMDB. At StatCan outside, it's already in the RDC for years. It's a very, very old program. So very, very interesting. But what's happening here is that we are attaching, like here I took the example of the health. We're attaching health information, and the example I use here is the discharge abstract database. So either you attach a file to another, either the IMDB or the lab, and you obtain the keys, and then you can do all your research based on these. Again, I think you understood a lot. I already said it's a 20% sample. It does contain all the Canadians. So if you don't want to make research on immigrants here, you have 20% of all the Canadians. It has the flag on immigration, and those two data sources, IMDB and the LARD, are connected every year. Okay, so you have lots of content that exists in the IMDB. You can retrieve it, place it into the LAD, and just reuse all of these. So the LAD is also a very relevant element when you want to see what's the difference in your population, Canadians versus immigrants. Okay, but now let's talk about what's happening with else with one indicator. The discharge abstract database has information at the person level. So did they go and access to health institution, hospital? And we have the event information. Okay, so both of those are available, will be available in the RDC. You have to choose, and again, you have to find a way to build your indicator or your research on some of those dates. Okay, so all this time could be confusing, and I wanted to show that because we have not made enormous amount of research ourselves on this component. We've done the linkage, we started a couple of data tables, but it's still beginning. I've heard colleagues of mine in Statistics Canada that do have just those health and immigration connection. They've been doing a little bit more research, but this is still fairly new, and in the RDC it might be unique. I think it's the first time we have that. So a couple of challenges to expect here. Okay, but with all those challenges, and remains a question when you get into your program and your data sources, what's going to happen is we've tried our best to prepare reports that's going to give you an overview of what you have in front of you. Okay, so we have explained how to link those data sources together. We have also placed distribution, sociodemographic information. The objective here was to make sure you can replicate your count, so you don't go too far into a linkage issue. What's going to happen is when you link administrative files together, based on the way your linkage is done, mistakes arrive pretty fast on errors into the links. Then you get a number. The problem is sometimes your number could be way too high or way too low, depending on the mistake you've done. So we have distribution for benchmark into our report, and we thought it was relevant. That was among the challenges we faced ourselves. The other thing we have, again, I'm using this example for the DAB, but it exists everywhere. We have information on the specificities of the files. So when it comes to DAD, for example, there is a movement. Historically, the files with DAD and knackers have been sharing people. I've been covered differently. Some of the activities has been covered in knackers, and then they move to DAD. So there's little specificities with some of those data sources. You'll find those specificities inside our report. There exists sometimes bias with the links or issues with the starting date. So you have to really be knowledgeable of this, and it's quite tricky. So this report should be able to give you this. Yeah. And the other thing, and not all the problems always start at the same time. So there's a couple of challenges that you're going to find into the report. I guess if you're not that familiar with programming with longitudinal data, there's simple tricks and simple elements exist into the report. We've placed a little bit of programs for you to start. Those are basics, but we hope it's gonna it's going to help you. I don't know, I'm doing with time actually go pretty fast. So that's the overall information for the LISE. And again, because it's kind of the beginning, the first time we're going to put it outside, we're going to learn from your experience. I just wanted to put a couple of expectations here. That it's actually my expectation. I was thinking about that. The research capacity, like we're trying to obtain or look into a new research capacity with education, for example. The couple of questions I had in mind. What's happening with immigrant children? We've done new modules, but in the IMDB. But right now we have all the information on their education. So if you start looking into sub-element of the IMDB and look at what type of education they obtain, what is the rate for post-secondary, or do they go to apprenticeship? All of this would be a pretty new research topic outside of the main, like immigrants succeed and how fast they succeed. Like this is a new topic that's interesting. Adult immigrants. I've talked a little bit earlier about a challenge. We often see that it's a credential recognition. It is something that the federal government has recognized. There are lots of efforts that have been placed, but it is not been solved. And I think there is lots of research capacity behind the way immigrants arrive here, go back to study when there is a lack of credential recognition, for example, or all the situation of going back to school for adult immigrants. I've placed another kind of idea here, pathways of students, and here I'm not talking about only temporary residents, but Canadians, you have them, immigrants, what's the pathway with education system? So we're not the first to link education to the IMDB, but we're going to be among the first to have like all the support we're giving you for those access. I think other linkages and approvals were done within the RDC with a project called ELMLP, which is fairly similar, but just for the education. This year allows you to go beyond that. Talking about health, again, this is not my field of research. I was trying to put a couple of elements. Some of them are already partially answered. Canadian and immigrants, are they facing similar health challenge? You'll see it in literature. Maybe some of you are expert with health topics and research, but at the beginning, when immigrants arrive here, the health situation is not exactly the same. There is so there are a couple of papers on that, but what we're offering here is probably to add a couple of elements on income, access to employment, health impact. So all of those research can be further, can continue. And again, I think one of the important elements here was the fact that we are not using samples, we're using full population. So you can work on health profile for specifically for family-sponsored immigrants, or for refugees, or for Syrian refugees. All of these are somehow fairly new for researchers. So I'm inviting you to think about this type of profile you can make, or extend the research that has been done in this field. As again, I'm not an expert in health here, but I've seen a little bit, and I think our integration of all those data sources together is a way for you to go beyond. So right now, and for you not to be surprised, right now, those links are using the last cycle of the IMDB, was not updated this year. So we are not thinking about this project as a project to look into what was the latest recent immigrant outcomes. We're here to find more historical events on how over time older immigrants from the 19th, from the 80s, how are they, how is their pathway, their settlement in Canada? How are they affected with health? What do they do with education? So maybe in the future, I hope we would obtain more support to say, okay, let's add new links for these data sources or update those links for these data sources. But right now, this project has been encompassing all of those 5, 6 data sources, and there's no more. We're trying to get enough interest. So that's the overall project. Now I wanted to show you a little element. So if you're going to, and hopefully it's going to work, if you're going to make your research proposal, I'm just placing you a little. So I work with the IMDB team. We have a hub, and in it there's a bunch of cool information. But if you're making your research proposal, we have a couple of tools and tables that are already telling you what the IMDB is capable of doing. And I think if you want to start with what's happening with health and education, you're going to have to understand what is all the indicators we already provide for education and try to build those profiles, try to build those research with this. So the website is pretty easy to link, as I said. That's statscan.gc.ca immigration/e. And from here, in the last couple of years, and again, that's also a project that was supported by IRCC, we've built dynamic portals, and that's an easy way for you to start drilling with subpopulation that you would have interest. Okay, it's coming. Oh, he's not happy. Give me a second. I'll try to do it again. Might not be able to do that. See, no. And that will reduce the amount of information I have for you. So anyway, if you're not familiar with longitudinal data, the way we use it, trends, this is a tool that can start your ideas on research plan. But I don't have it, so don't hesitate. And that's about it for the questions. So thank you. I'm open for your questions.
Thank you. Virtual round of applause for Tristan. So we've still got almost half an hour left, which is exactly what we want for this series, because now, we put Tristan on the hot seat and everyone gets to ask him all their difficult questions. So since we're a pretty small group, feel free to just unmute, turn on your video, and we can have some questions for the last little bit. And then when things die down, we'll all just say goodbye. So maybe while people are thinking of things, I'll just ask, there was I think I was talking actually with you, and you may have still been at IRCC at the time, but there was a question of linking the community and social services data from Ontario to the IMDB T1 to try to understand social assistance use, particularly for refugees. Is that still going forward? Do you know anything about that?
The use of what?
The social assistance data from Ontario.
Assistance. No, we tried that years ago without a big success. The access of the table or the data was not secure at StatCan. I think there were some piece that was coming from Ontario, and when we discussed with Ontario to build this project, that was among the questions. Some of it is provincial, and it was creating issues, and we couldn't go beyond that. If we would have had a need to drill down to all the provinces. Would have been a challenge. In your tax, the T1, there is some basic information for this indicator, but not too much drill. And I've heard precise question for it for the IMDB.
Okay.
I've seen my colleague Ellen that was around the room, but I don't see her anymore. But I'd say hi to Helen, which she's working at RCC now.
I saw a video come on. Does anyone have any questions for Tristan while we've got him here?
Hi, can you hear me?
We do.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been using already the IMDB and the LAD for a while. And what I'm seeing is more in the 80s until the early 90s. Sometimes we have some inconsistencies. I don't know if you have any tip about how to correct them. I think it's more related to low-income people, but I'm not sure. But I think it's like our tax system has changed during the 90s mainly, and then we have better reports. I don't know if you have done some tests about that, how we can check with official data if like the amount of tax reports that we have access in LAD or IMDB, they are similar to the tax reports that we would have like to check for the amount of the population, Canadian population. I think like the main issue I'm facing is that in the 80s and 90s, there is some selection. There is some people that are declaring taxes because they're attached to the labor market, but we are missing some people in the IMDB and LAD because they're not declaring taxes. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
So I've heard about some of it. The main challenge, so we have a good coverage for the 80s and 90s for immigrants back to their CRA information. The main challenge is some program arrived over time, okay? In the 80s, there is a bunch of programs that probably didn't exist and were created in the 90s. So there is an inconsistency with the rate of the 80s and the 90s because in the 90s, they might have new program that arrived. And it's the same thing for year and year and year. If you look into what's happening with the support for the COVID-19, it's going to be the same thing. So then you look into those rates, you try to make it consistent year over year, but the policy has changed. So I don't think I have not heard that much of elements that we're missing. I've heard about inconsistency over time because policies has arrived and has added one to the other, okay? There are also programs that were shut down. The dictionary we have for the tax explain most of those. Now, it's, you would have to really look into the precise indicator that is calculated. So when you look into, in the tax one, there's SAS-BY, and you look into the rates and how they change, what's happening is in your SAS-BY indicator, the variable, the way it's built differently from a year to a year. Okay, so there are breaks based on policy. I don't have much more precise element to tell you, but I am not aware about data issue, data coverage. I'm aware about changes historically. Okay.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Marcus? Is that, it sounds like kind of what you were expecting, is that it's just people aren't filing. So, okay. Lisa, you have your hand up?
Yes. Hi, Tristan. I already have access to IMDB and LAD, and if I want to add PSID, can I just ask for contract revision to add PSIS and special key?
Yeah, exact. So you will have to make a change. So you access them to the RDC. Looks like an office from StatCan, you are in, but you access them from the RDC, Lisa?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So yes, you would have to change your research proposal and define the change, and then the request is going to come to us. Now, the way I didn't, probably not that interesting. I'm not the ownership of all of this data I've talked about, of all of those 6 data sources outside of the IMDB. So what's happening is we receive, as LISE responsible team, we receive component and then we reshare it for the subject matter team. So you're going to submit and add a research justification plus a research tool, PCs or RAISE, or both of them. Usually people ask for both. RAISE, R-A-I-S, for apprenticeship. Submit them. It's going to arrive to me. I'm going to see there is an education. I'll send it to education. Education is going to make the subject matter decision on it. They will, and then from the same folder you have, that's my expectation, from the same folder you already have in the RDC, we're going to drop a bunch of keys to this, and then education is going to open their folder to you as well, and with those keys you're going to be able to relink everything.
Great, thanks so much.
Okay.
So sorry, I have a silly question. There is a file. I think it's called the immigrant landing file, ILF. Do you know if you have access to it through the IMDB or not?
It's a question. It's from me. Yeah. The landing file. Some people used to call it the landing file. It is in the IMDB. This is the only way in the RDC you can have access to the full population of immigrants. It's the landing file that is part of the IMDB. The IMDB main role is for you to access to tax filers, although the non-tax filers also exist into it. You are non-tax filers, so immigrants are very high level of immigrants, high rate of immigrants file their taxes, extremely high actually. I think I heard it was more than Canadians. But you still have children into this file. About, I don't know, I think it's less than a quarter of all the landed immigrants are children. You can have access to all of this information, okay? So non-tax filers are part of the IMDB, and you can retrieve it in the RDC.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one more question about the 2nd generation immigrants in the data? Because they wouldn't be in the IMDB. So and maybe I just wasn't following close enough. But how do they factor in? Where do we see them? Like, are they just coming in through T1 records, or what's the way that they enter into this environment?
Yeah, you're right. They're, first of all, the 2nd generation is not in the IMDB. Some people call the 1.5 generation, so they come very early, before 18 years old, and they are part of the IMDB. But if you were born and raised in Canada from immigrants, you're a 2nd generation. This population is can be looked upon when you look at the family outcomes. So the IMDB has, the tax information has 2 information, one for the individual, the other one for the family. And among the, as I said, it's really wide what we have in the T1FF. Among this, you're going to have some information of CCTVs, so children tax benefits are going to be there. So if you're an immigrant and you arrive, let's say at 20, and you get children born here, then you're going to have at one point your CCTV. So it's going to give you an indicator in it. We have in the IMDB a count for inside our tax component of number of people represented into your T1, and number of those that are immigrants. Okay, So you could have, there's a variable, it could tell you there is 5 people in the household filing taxes. 2 of those are Canadian born, and 3 of them are immigrants found in the IMDB. So you'll be able to rebuild that. Okay, so the IMDB has some kind of family component, but you're getting into tricky territories, but it's possible.
Okay. It looks like Marcus has his hand up again.
Yeah, I just want to confirm. So you said during your presentation that now we have the temporary residents also in IMDB. Is that right? Or do we just have temporary residents that became permanent residents?
No, we have all of them. We provide you a file that contains all permits for temporary foreign workers, students, claimants. We don't have any visitor. So that's the 3 components we have. The IMDB has it in 2 ways, either as a person level or as an event permit level. Okay, person level is going to be kind of easier to handle, but there's this. We have tax for them. Sometimes the T1 is, the coverage for T1 is lower. So, but we have T4 coverage. Okay, so that could help, and that's one of the reasons behind the T4 is that the T4 is a very small source of information. It's going to provide you number of jobs within 1 year, I think, and the total income and of employment and the provinces. And that's about it. Like 3 variables, I think, are in the T4, more or less. That's going to be a good source for your temporary residency, but look into your T1FF as well. Again, I was kind of talking about the complexity to deal with time. What we do more often, or what I've seen more often, is we take permanent residents and we look into their past information. So, do my permanent resident has a study in Canada or has studied in Canada as a temporary foreign student? Has he had a work permit? And we track it this way to keep one start point, the landing information, and continue. But it's not mandatory. You could study the temporary residency. Check out challenges and coverage of tax, because a foreign student, for example, may not file T1, may not have T4 either. So you're living into just the type of permit they have and their pathways just for those permits without economic income. Same way their access to health would be difficult. Information on PCs could be one element if you want, which the LISE could give you.
So you could figure out what your rate was, though. Like if you asked IRCC to tell you how many student permits were issued in a given year, then you could say, like, you know, I'm missing half or I'm missing 30% or something. So that might be a way to kind of approach that for a paper that would say, you know, I'm working with a selected sample, but, you know, here's the population, just as a suggestion.
Yeah, and we have RCC shares 100% of what they have. So we have all the counts. Now, the way the counts are done, it's tricky. There are rules at StatCan to do population estimates. RCC has their own rule as well. When you have a person within the same year that has 50-50 worker and student, then you have to count. You have to find a way. So there are a couple of tricky rules over there, but 100% of what RCC receives, the temporary resident, they send it to us.
Mm-hmm. Xavier?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for you know, this workshop. It's really useful, and it's good to see the LISE coming to life. I have 2 questions, and I really want to apologize if you already answered this. I had to step away for like 10 minutes for a phone call. So just let me know if you've already answered this, and I guess watch the video, the recording if it's put online. So first question. So the T4 files, Is it like an extract from the T4 file that's also linked to other data sets from 2000 to 2019? Like what's in there? Like, for example, is there an employer identifier or some way to identify changes in employers? Is there like firm size linked to it? Is there like these information that sometimes are found with T4 related data sets? Or is it just like earnings and number of T4s? Okay, so that's the first question. Second question, I think I know the answer, but I just want to confirm. So is the linkage with the census only with the 2016 census, or is it with previous censuses as well?
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great question. The T4, we have stripped it down to province, I think, number in the year and the total income. Okay, as far as I remember, I haven't used it in a fair amount of time. There is no information on the employer in it. Okay, there is not going to have. I don't think there is the industry of employment. So people want to use that sometimes, like the NAICS. I don't think it's over there neither. So it's pretty limited, the T4. Okay.
But that information is available in the business data. Like there is an immigrant identifier in the business data, Xavier.
Exact. So yeah, exact. So things that are going to come to RDCE, that's what I've heard in the last month or two. The SEED, the CEEDD, the Canadian Employer-Employee Dynamic Database, data source that we've been using internally for 5 to 6 years, something like that. It's coming outside the first time. I think it's going to be, if it could have been public months ago, or it's coming in the next 3 to 5 months. It will provide you all the employer and employee information and all those elements. So what you want for the T4, you'll have it over there with more precision. You can still look into the IMDB T4, but we are limited here. Census. We first did place the agreement for more than one census, but at the end we didn't get the rights for any census prior to 2016. I think there is a privacy reason for that. And we do not have the 2021 yet, but I'm hoping one day we will have. So right now you just have the 2016, but it was, we redid all the linkage keys of the census, so it's a pretty good good project, and yeah, no more in the past, maybe in the future.
Okay, thank you. So on my end, I think like having censuses on different years is really, really useful for researchers, sometimes because the information changes, because the census is the only data set in that linkage that has occupations, and occupations is usually important to understand labor market dynamics. And so like sometimes having only one census kind of messes up the timing of some analysis we may want to do. And so if there's a plan in the future to include the 2021 and so on censuses from the researcher's perspective, it would be really, really useful. Yeah, but thank you. Yeah.
No, I heard that before, that census 2016 was a big use for research at IRCC, at Statistics Canada, to compare NOCs between what people in the IMDB, you're going to have what people intended to do. In the 2016, you're going to have what they are doing. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's how part of the information on the credentials has existed. IRC used a lot about those differences in NOC. So you can do it at least for 1 year, and if we get it for 2021, you'll redo it as well. It's on 20%. The NOC, I think, is on 20% of the census respondents, not the 100%. But again, we're talking about full population. But if you wanted to look into different time frame, 2016, 2011, 2006, you would have 20%, and then 20% of another one, and another 20% of it. it wouldn't work that well. So you can compare 2021 when it's going to exist to a table of 2020, 2016. That's the capacity you would have.
Thank you. That's really useful.
So speaking of things that would be really useful to researchers and recognizing that IRCC is not the custodian of this data, has there been any discussion with border services about getting exit from the country, return migration, or, going to the US or something? Have you had any discussions on that front? So
it is not in my section, but I talk to those people pretty often. This is to the responsibility of demography. Demography is doing the population estimates. What they're trying to do is verify if people are living, what is the immigration rate. It is a tricky topic. It's been years that they're trying to obtain more information and exchange with the state, USA and Mexico. It has arrived and it is used. I think it's already used into the population estimates. We don't use it with the IMDB at all, and we will not, because it's too much outside of our responsibility. But we are improving our measures for populations with this. Yes.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time for today. We did manage to fill all of Tristan's hour, so that's nice. Just putting out a last call. Does anyone have any final questions, final thoughts? I don't think Tristan would ignore your email if you were to send him to think of something later and have another question. But thank you, Tristan, for being with us today, and thank you to everyone who attended. I'm gonna try to put up a quick poll, and hopefully some of you can give us some feedback. This just helps us kind of plan for some of the future training sessions and figure out what was interesting to people. So thank you very much if you're willing to fill that out for us. And I'll just leave that open for a couple minutes and let people filter through that. And thank you, everyone, and have a lovely long weekend.